Story 1. I went on one date with a woman who told me she was in therapy for domestic abuse. I assumed it meant she had been abused by her spouse. In conversation, she mentioned deliberately burning her daughter with a curling iron. That's when I realized she was the abuser. I was glad she was getting therapy, but I could not continue dating her. Story 2. Some things are better left to the imagination after I undressed. Story 3. I followed you a couple of times, but you never noticed me. I love you. From now on, you are not allowed to speak to other men. All of that came from the same man on the same night, our first and only date. Story 4. He told the story of how he had thrown a milkshake out of a moving car at an older woman walking on the sidewalk and hit her in the chest. He could barely tell the story because he was laughing so hard. I thought this was something he had done in middle school to show off for his friends. That would have been bad enough. No, he did this when he was 21. What a plain fucking asshole. Fuck you, John. Story 5. He told me that he put antibiotics in an ex-girlfriend's drink because he believed he had given her chlamydia and did not want her to know. He confessed this. I was shocked. Story 6. I have to lie to you because you will overreact if I tell you what I did. Story 7. He was the only other gay guy at my rural Deep South high school. Super cute, and I was infatuated. He was out and very confident, which I really admired. I finally scored a date with him. On our way to dinner, he deliberately ran over a squirrel and laughed hysterically when the tires lifted and it crunched. My soul left my body, I swear. Story 8. It wasn't a lie, really, it was just something I said so you'd like me. Once I realized that she didn't think lies counted if they were told to manipulate people, I was out. Story 9. While he was breaking up with me, I felt sad. He said not to be jealous of the woman he would end up with, saying she would be nothing more than a sex toy. Story 10. My ex completely changed after we got married. When I asked him why he'd lied about who he was before, he said, "I didn't think you'd like me if you knew." I replied, "Don't you think I deserve to decide that for myself? Now I just can't trust you at all." He said, "But then you wouldn't have married me." Surprise, we got divorced. Story 11. Not really dating because we had only one date, but on the first date he proudly told me that when his ex kicked him out of the house she owned, he put an upper decker in all 3 toilets, meaning he put feces in the tanks. He hid it between the mattress and box spring of her bed and the guest bed, and smeared it on the bottom of several kitchen drawers and in 2 heating vents. He justified it by saying she was crazy and got jealous because she was wasting her life working for the man, while he still knew how to have fun and not let money control him. I left immediately. Story 12. I don't read books written by women. Yes, he was a total arsehole. Story 13. He proudly admitted to having videos on his phone of all his sexual conquests. Story 14. I already had a terrible impression of him, but he had beaten me so badly that I could not fight back until he brought me my cat, my late cat Boo. He held her up by the neck and tail and pulled, kicking me every time I tried to take her from him. Now I know you will never leave, because you will never trust me with the cat. Ironically, that gave me the strength to get away from him. That old, grumpy rescue saved my life more times than anyone will ever know. Story 15. After knowing him for about 6 years, he randomly told me he was depressed that I had quit my old job and that I had become much less useful to him. The wording threw me off. He was good at masking, so I thought he had misspoken. Surely it was not my career that made me useful to him? It was. He said a big part of his interest in me was my career because he had hoped to have a career like mine. It was how we met, so my switching was a bit of a letdown. Eventually he clarified that even though I was now making over 5 times the salary I made at my prior job and had transformed my life, and even though I shared much of that money with him daily on food and designer clothes he liked, the fact that I no longer worked in his industry made him sad every day. He felt I should have stayed in that industry to help his career with contacts and advice, but he said I was selfish and would take that the wrong way. Story 16. I'll marry you only if I don't get someone better. We had been dating for 2 years. She was the one who first proposed to me. We were a good match. Everything was smooth until she said that. I laughed it off. Once I came home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I brought it up and it became a huge fight. She said she meant it, so I broke it off. Story 17. My ex told me he hates when people tell me no. He would only bring it up on days he asked for sex. Story 18. Sorry, I can't assist with content that sexualizes minors. I can, however, provide a safe, TTS-friendly rewrite that removes sexual details and victim blaming. A news report covered an alleged assault. Claims that the victim provoked or wanted the incident are harmful, false, and unacceptable. Story 19. I was in a drama group, and the girl I was crushing on was very sweet. She had been homeschooled and was very naive. I never saw her do anything mean. I adored her. There was another girl who had a medical condition that sometimes caused her to wet her pants a little. She was very poor and often smelled bad. My sweet crush proactively went up to the other girl in front of everyone and asked, "Is that a new perfume you're wearing? You smell so good." The other girl's face immediately fell. She had a look like she did not know what to say or whether the comment was mean. She replied, "Actually, yes. Thank you for noticing," and immediately left the room. A bunch of people who had witnessed the whole thing laughed, and my crush turned around and let out a huge laugh she had been stifling. Couldn't look at her anymore. Story 20. While arguing with his younger brother about politics and who was right, he asked, "Who has the blue check mark next to their name?" He was a 48-year-old trying to one-up his 34-year-old brother, as if his brother should recognize his wisdom. Ah yes, elite Instagram man. Story 21. He said that I should light its ass on fire when referring to my dog and then suggested I let her go loose in the woods. He had never even met my dog. He just had a thing against tiny animals, I suppose. Story 22. He saw an interracial couple with their biracial toddler at the mall and told me he did not believe in mixing races. I am biracial. Story 23. It was something he said while I was with him in the car. Sitting at a set of lights, he rolled down the window and shouted, "Hey, fatty, have another donut," at a large woman who was waiting to cross the road. That was our last date. Story 24. He told me about a play he once wrote to humanize rapists. It involved a woman sitting on stage, pretending to be drunk at a bar, with men sitting around her. It flashed back to each man's past, showing something that had gone wrong in his life: divorce, job loss, being rejected for a date. After that, the woman staggers off stage, clearly drunk. All the men look at each other and follow her off stage, implying they gang rape her because they had a bad day. It was the worst thing I have ever heard. He called himself a feminist. A friend of a friend told me about the man she dated for 6 months. She broke it off after he told her about his rape play. It turned out we had both dated him. He is unfortunately influential in my local art scene, but I warn people about him when I can. Story 25. We had been together for 15 years. I confessed to him that I was having suicidal thoughts and was begging him for help. He told me that I was a worthless cunt, that he hated me, and that he wished he could kill me himself. I found that extremely hurtful. Edited to add, the reason I stayed was because I felt trapped. At the time I experienced every form of abuse except physical, though that was sporadic, emotional, sexual, and financial. I felt worthless and believed I was lucky that someone would care about me. A disabled person who suffers from a crippling pain condition that led to depression and anxiety. He isolated me from all my friends and even tried to isolate me from my family. Within days of him saying that, I ended up in the hospital with a life-threatening infection. I had been ignoring the infection because things were so bad at home. I was scared to leave my daughter and my dog with him. I was in intensive care and had emergency surgery. I should have been in the hospital for weeks, but because of the coronavirus disease 2019 and my threat to sign out against medical advice so I could get home to my daughter, I managed to reach a sort of deal with the doctors that allowed me to leave much earlier than I should have. When I came home, he was still angry about me being suicidal. He refused to help me even though I was still very ill and had a large surgical wound to deal with. That was when I decided enough was enough. My daughter was old enough to start really understanding how he treats me, and I would not let her think this is what a relationship is supposed to be like. It's been almost exactly 2 years of careful planning, secrets, and the support of loving friends who welcomed me back into their group with open arms. I am just waiting to hear back about housing assistance, and then my daughter and I can start a new, happier life. I'm happy to answer any additional questions. If someone reading this is going through something similar, I promise you can get out. It might take time, but you can do it. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other and don't give up hope. You are loved. Story 26. I found out my ex had been cheating on me with multiple women at his funeral. Rage has a funny way of burning away grief. Story 27. Months after I told my ex how sexually violated I felt and after ongoing abuse and arguments, he told me that his first thought was that he would show me what it is really like to be violated. He essentially confessed to planning how he wanted to rape me, down to the details. I already resented him, but this made me genuinely fear him. Story 28. A couple of months after an ex-boyfriend cheated on me, and I gave him another chance, one of his friends whom I liked hanging out with told me he was into me. I told my ex-boyfriend, and he said he knew and even encouraged his friend to try to hook up with me because they flirted all the time and he wanted to call it even. It made me realize how emotionally manipulative he was, trying to bait me into sleeping with someone else so I would have no leg to stand on. Story 29. I am a veterinary nurse. While describing the emotionally difficult day I had, he said they were just animals and it was not like I was dealing with human lives. I lost all interest and respect for him on the spot. Story 30. I used his Google to search for something one day, and one of his recent searches was, how to get my sister to have sex with me. After 2 years of dealing with his behavior, this did not shock me as much as one might expect. Story 31. My ex repeatedly pressured me to involve my friend in activities that made me uncomfortable. I told him to stop. Story 32. I do not like having sex with you because you were sexually assaulted. Thinking about that grosses me out. Story 33. I deal with sciatica. It's excruciatingly painful and makes walking difficult, so I walk with a pretty severe limp. This was new to me 3 years ago and new to her. She did not see the extent of my pain because of how much I was working at the time. Our first time in public, walking from the car to Home Depot, she stopped dead in her tracks, turned to me and said, "You need to stop walking like that. You're embarrassing me. People are looking." The tone of utter disgust and anger in her voice was repulsive. I felt so hurt, betrayed, and disappointed. My entire image of this woman that I loved had shattered. Everything was downhill from there. Several months later, I had been taking an antidepressant, which she offered to refill in my monthly pill sorter because I was struggling to keep up with my medications. Each day had its own pod. I was on so many different medications at one point that I assumed everything was in the pods and I would wake up and take the whole pod like a shot. She failed to inform me that after a certain day I was out of that antidepressant and it needed a refill called in. As a result, over the next several days I had increasingly worsening withdrawal symptoms. One day, upon returning home with my son, I collapsed on the porch steps and blacked out. He banged on the door and screamed for me to wake up. I eventually was somewhat mentally there but physically could not get up or say anything. She finally came out, pulled him quickly into the house, then nudged me with her foot several times and, in the same tone as before, said, "Get up. This is disgusting and you're embarrassing me. The neighbors can see you." She then left me on the porch for more than 15 minutes until I was able to crawl inside. There are so many other instances of this from her that I cannot remember half of them, but I remember how she made me feel. I do not ever want to date again. I've never felt so betrayed in my life. Edit. I was not perfect in this relationship. I had my downfalls and caveats, mostly mental health related, including depression, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autism struggles. But I was never cruel, mentally, emotionally, or physically abusive. She would get chronic migraines and needed to sleep for 3 days. Without hesitation, I did what I could to tend to her, check in on her, and treat her with the human decency she deserved. But when I had multiple days of burnout or depressive sleep episodes, she would get irate and scream bloody murder at me. I regret deciding to type any of this because I am mentally reliving it. Edit. Wow. I never expected this much attention here. Thank you all for your kind words. I'm doing okay, or as well as I can be. I'm still terrified of relationships or even trying to date. Perhaps one day someone will fall out of the sky and land in my lap, but I will not get my hopes up. Yes, I've left her. She could not wrap her head around why. It's truly mind-boggling how she saw no wrong in what she did and still does not. I hate that I'm stuck dealing with her for at least the next 16 years, but I do my best to keep the peace, although sometimes it is to my own detriment. It is just not worth setting her off because it can lead to months of her lashing out and being cruel. Story 34. A man told me that he raped his mother while she was unconscious from drinking. Story 35. They did not wash their buttocks because they felt the soap and water from their upper body would reach them. Story 36. Him, I hate Kim Kardashian. Me, oh yeah, I do not understand the appeal. I think reality television is annoying. Him, no, because she is Armenian. Story 37. She looked at me, took my plate away, and told me I had eaten enough. I was given Spam and an oatmeal smoothie. Story 38. He said he has hypersexuality from trauma and can't help it when I confronted him about cheating through sexting. We should have a threesome. Not with a man. I prefer women. I'll let you pick the other woman. I would probably end up marrying an Asian woman. They have the cutest asses. He said this to me, a white person. You are the reason your ex killed himself. Story 39. When my ex-husband and I were having fertility problems and had an appointment with my obstetrician gynecologist to find the cause, the doctor asked him if he was able to have children. He said yes, then told me that he had apparently gotten someone pregnant. He had previously told me I was the second person he had slept with. After this revelation, he said I was the third and later the fourth. He then said he knew this woman who lived in a recreational vehicle park where his mother lived. He lived there too. The story changed several times, starting with her having a miscarriage the day after and ending with him saying he had probably just dreamed the whole thing. Another incident involved a woman he had met while dating online before he met me. We had only been dating for about 2 weeks at that point, and he told me the plane tickets were non-refundable. After 5 years of me asking whether he had cheated and him denying it, one night he finally admitted he had. Then he changed his story again, saying he had not slept with her, and that she had only given him a hand job. It made me realize I could never trust anything he said. He changed his stories and lied so he would not upset me and so I would not leave. Story 40. He told me his ex's cat did not like him and attacked him. He made her choose between the cat and him. She had the cat put down. He broke up with her a few days later. He told it like a flex, saying, "Look at the hold I have on women." He turned out to be a disgusting human being, to no one's surprise. Story 41. After my first husband and I got married, he told me I needed to lose weight because he said I was a bit fat. I weighed 110 pounds at 5 feet 3 inches. I should have left right then. Story 42. He told me, laughing, how he kicked the slow guy in the back of the knees as he climbed the stairs. I felt immediate disgust and every other negative reaction you can name. Story 43. I went on a date with someone who admitted they went to the local alternative club just to make fun of people who were dancing badly. I immediately lost all attraction to them when I realized they were a huge fucking loser. Story 44. On a first date, the man called the waitress the fucking N-word. Thank God she did not hear. He and I had an intense exchange and I saw his jaw lock up. That is what my ex-husband's jaw would do right before he was going to lose it. So I was on the defensive and a little scared, but I held my own. Then I made him very mad. I cannot remember what I said, but I knew it was pissing him off. So I backed up a bit and told a joke. He then made a half-serious joke about leaving me at the restaurant, and I said it was a good thing I had driven. I drove myself on the first few dates as a matter of personal policy so I could leave if I needed to. The date ended early, and I never saw him again. Fuck that shit. How ignorant does one have to be to say that about another person? I do not get it and never will. I apologize for my poor storytelling. I am getting older, and my thoughts are not as together as they used to be. Story 45. I lied about my infertility. That doctor's appointment never happened, and the girl I was dating at that time does not exist. Story 46. Why does the toilet or shower need to be cleaned? They clean themselves. Yeah, I had to take a breather after that. Story 47. He told me he studied a type of dating strategy called the game. It was about keeping women guessing and making them feel like they had to have you. It was gross, and I don't understand why he told me. I had worked with him for years before we dated. He had been such a sweet guy. But that nonsense was the end. Story 48. I once confided in my boyfriend that I had been sexually assaulted as a child. He began crying and said that growing up with type 1 diabetes had been more traumatic than what I had endured and that he was not even sure he believed me. That one is now an ex-boyfriend. Story 49. I like dating younger women because they're easier to manipulate, he said to my face. He was 11 years older. I'm glad I got out. Story 50. She told me how she and her male housemate would place bets on how persistently people she dated would try to contact her. She would ice out caring friends and brag about it. Then she preached that everyone should go to therapy, mostly meaning others. Story 51. I browsed this post thinking I would find things like my boyfriend eats his own boogers. Instead, 90% of the responses were about ex-partners being sociopaths. Scary. Story 52. I was seeing a pretty damn good-looking, intelligent woman I met at university until one day she openly made fun of a person with a disability who was right in front of us. I was done then. She said I just did not understand her sense of humor. I told her she was absolutely correct and left. Story 53. He liked warm water with his cereal. Game over, man. Story 54. I didn't have time to wipe. He was in the bathroom for 15 minutes and still did not wipe the feces from his buttocks. Yes, he smelled horrid. Story 55. My first ex said he would disown any gay children we had. He was toxic in every way, but that was a wake-up call and gave me the push I needed to leave him. Story 56. We were talking about dinosaurs and he started insisting that they weren't real. He said fossils were a test from God. We broke up that day. Story 57. On a third date, I mentioned my specialty. I am a psychologist who works with trauma, especially women who have been sexually assaulted. At one point he said, "Wait, so you believe rape is never a woman's fault, no matter what she is wearing?" I was speechless. Story 58. It's not my fault someone else raped you. I shouldn't have to respect the boundaries you set because of what he did. We are no longer together. I left his ass. Story 59. I had an ex who bought a house and asked me to move in with her. She then decided that the job we both did was too much and quit without consulting me, which meant that I had to pay her mortgage. She then got a job at a supermarket, filling shelves on minimum wage, earning around 1/5 of her original income. Money was tight, but we survived. A few months later, while walking around town, I decided to buy a Homer Simpson air freshener for £1, only to be told that we could not afford something so frivolous and should only buy necessities. Fair enough. I put it back. When we got home and emptied the shopping, there were 2 small jars of face cream that cost over £50 each. I picked one up and asked, "Necessity?" and was told yes. Do you want me to look like a fucking hag? I started planning my escape immediately. I spoke to a solicitor who said the bad news was that nothing was in my name and the good news was the same. I stopped paying all the bills, including the mortgage, and a few weeks later I found out she was also cheating on me. I begged her to let me stay for a few more weeks until I found somewhere else. It ended up being 6 weeks. I promised to keep paying the bills until I left. When I moved all my stuff out, I presented her with a pile of unpaid bills, including 3 missed mortgage payments, and told her that her new partner, Darren the security guard, could pay them. If she had just been honest and not used me as a meal ticket, I would have been happy to pack up and move out. Fuck you, Joe. You deserved it. Story 60. My ex, after meeting my family for the first time, raved about my 14-year-old sister. She's hot. If you want, I could take her out and teach her how to bang. Needless to say, I did not want that. He could not be anywhere near my little sister. I broke up with him then and there. I had just turned 25, and he said I was too old and ugly for him anyway. He was 30 and trying to prey on a 14-year-old. What the hell? Story 61. My former partner was sleeping with a woman who had a boyfriend who loved her and supported not only her, but also her children from another man. He only saw her as a body. The woman would gaslight the boyfriend whenever he asked if she was cheating on him. My former partner laughed as he recalled the boyfriend running after them, tears in his eyes, after catching them together in a hotel. They tried to flee him, laughing all the way. Story 62. My ex liked to get massages. I did not think much of it at first. I went with him once. The place did not seem shady. A few months into our relationship, he told me he had received more than a massage a couple of times and went into more detail than I was comfortable with. That grossed me out more than he probably expected. A few months later, during an argument, he asked if I was going to be just a bartender my entire life. After I got sober, almost everything he said turned me off. Story 63. He bragged about how many girls he's been with. It seems like a lot of guys do this, and it's not impressive at all. Story 64. I loved the way you loved me, my groomer said, referring to me as a preteen. Story 65. I have chronic sinus problems, so I do not care if I smell bad. Story 66. I was living in Japan and dating a Japanese teacher who taught Japanese to foreigners. He was not my teacher. The first thing he asked when we met was to see my residence card. I thought nothing of it. On our second date, he told me he asks his students the same thing and showed me a Japanese website where you can report undocumented immigrants for money. I kicked him out and blocked him on all platforms. Story 67. He made a list of his sexual partners, including their breast size and information on sexual preferences, so he could choose from a catalog whom he would contact depending on his mood. Story 68. I was a passenger in Jay's car. There was a cat in the road, slightly off to the side. He swerved in an attempt to hit the cat. I yelled, "What are you doing?" He said, "Ah man, I've always wanted to hit a cat." Story 69. Not an ex, but someone I knew said he would never be able to see his wife the same way after she gave birth. He was a medical student and said that watching a woman give birth is a major turn-off and that he would never be able to have feelings for her again. Story 70. I lost my virginity to rape. I made the first man I dated afterward, who knew what had happened to me, wait a long time before we had sex. When we finally had sex and said I love you for the first time, he immediately told me he had been accused of rape and that the police were involved. Story 71. He stalked and shot an armadillo that was minding its own business in the woods with a .45 caliber pistol and laughed as it ran away to die. The same day he bludgeoned a deer to death with stones after shooting it with a black powder rifle when it did not die immediately. We were hunting, which obviously can result in a killed deer, but he was a psychopath and extremely disrespectful about it. I have not been hunting since. Story 72. Don't be depressed. It makes me sad. I can still hear his whiny fucking voice saying it while he played World of Warcraft. Story 73. Sorry, I can't assist with requests that sexualize minors. I can, however, help by rephrasing the passage to remove sexual content. For example, he made inappropriate comments to his daughter and told her directly more than once, according to him. Story 74. I wasn't dating him, but when he asked me why I didn't want children and I explained the risks and how little it appealed to me, he said I knew too much. He already knew I was studying pathology, so that really sealed that nothing was ever going to happen between us. Story 75. He claimed the pictures of his teenage niece's friends saved on his phone were harmless. Spoiler alert, they were not. Story 76. Trigger warning. Animal abuse. Someone told me that his cat had kittens and the family did not want them. So he dug holes and half-buried the kittens alive, leaving their little heads sticking out, and then ran over them with the lawnmower. It was probably 20 years ago, and I still cannot forget that someone could do something so utterly vile and cruel. I wish I could go back in time and contact the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals or do something to seek justice for those poor kittens. I was young and horrified. My first instinct was to stay away, but I still feel so sad for the kittens. Story 77. He said, "Black people are lesser people than us." So confidently, as if it were a fact. I was shocked and disgusted. I knew I had to get away from him. Story 78. I met him at 17 and we started dating when I was 18. About 6 months into our relationship, he said the icky cliché that he thought I was very mature for my age when he met me and that the other men in our friend group had said the same. Then he added that he had won. He said this in front of the group, and they all joked about who would be the first to have sex with me. I wish I could say I broke up with him immediately, but it took me another 3 months. Story 79. My ex-partner was my high school sweetheart, and we were in the same year. Many years after finishing school, while talking about school life, I mentioned Brad Heap, not his real name. He had been bullied relentlessly for being poor and in foster care. He carried an old-fashioned canvas bag, and some kids called him a heap of shit. He was very withdrawn, and I felt for him. I showed Brad my timetable and told him he was welcome to join me in my photography class, since I usually had the darkroom to myself because most of my classmates were doing digital photography. I wanted him to have some reprieve from the bullies because I could never find Brad during our lunch breaks. My ex-partner laughed and told me how he and 3 other boys in our year chased Brad down, beat him, and then urinated on him. Writing this now brings tears to my eyes. Brad was an awesome guy who just needed a friend. I hate my ex-partner with every fiber of my being for what he did to Brad, and I told him in no uncertain terms how much of a fucking low-life, cowardly piece of shit he is. Story 80. After hiding his fentanyl addiction for months, he said he had been manipulating me but that it was in the past and asked what I wanted him to do about it. Story 81. Not as extreme as some things I've seen, but he would make remarks about other women in supermarkets or on the street. He commented on their lip filler and fake eyelashes, things I usually don't notice, and if I do, I do not mention. I think too much lip filler looks bad. But live and let live. He always targeted women with these remarks, and each time it repelled me. It made me feel like he went around judging people. His generally misanthropic view dragged my mood down. Story 82. He repeatedly asked me to get my nipples pierced because he liked that his ex had them, even though I said absolutely not. He couldn't let it go. Story 83. While having sex with a man, he became aggressive and rough. Fortunately, I am into that, but he did not know at the time. He asked if I was afraid of him. I said no. I was enjoying myself. He seemed disappointed and stopped. Story 84. He claimed that he never asked random women for nude photos. They just sent them to him, so it was not his fault that he had all these pictures of other women, and he said it was because he is a natural-born alpha. I was disgusted. Story 85. This will sound pretty silly after all the incredibly horrifying things I have read on this thread, but a couple of years ago I met a man who had gone to Harvard Medical School and was clearly way too into it. I had already agreed to the date. I had a headache and a cold, which I told him the night before, but he insisted that since he had gone to medical school he would be fine. I overslept, and on the day that was supposed to be our first date I arrived 1 hour late. I apologized repeatedly. He said, "I cannot believe you made a Harvard man wait." I laughed because of course that was a joke, right? Wrong. He meant every word. He truly could not understand how I had made a Harvard man wait. It was hilarious because my family is very high achieving. I have never heard of or seen any of my family members behave this way. It was so odd because he truly believed he should be treated differently because he was a Harvard man. Yes, I pretended to have a good time and left quickly. Story 86. The man I dated for 2 weeks wrote "I hate her" name on his wall and then wallpapered over it after his ex broke up with him. He later revealed that he was regularly stalking her profile and had tried to contact her multiple times with no luck because he wanted to be friends with her. Needless to say, that did not sit well with me. He was a poor excuse for a man. Story 87. My ex told me about a time he threw a brick at a cat. The cat was just sitting there. I have no idea why he did it, why he told me, or why I did not run away then. Story 88. He asked me if I wanted a donut from the apple orchard. We had been dating for 3 years and living together. He cheated repeatedly and was extremely abusive. I was truly brainwashed into believing I was worthless. I had no family, but one good childhood memory was getting donuts from our local apple orchard and picking apples. I asked him every year for 3 years to go with me since I had no friends or family. He refused. Lo and behold, he took the girl he was cheating with to the same apple orchard I had told him about. There are many orchards in the area. That one was special to me. He brought back donuts and boasted about the wonderful time they had, then asked me if I wanted one. All the bullshit hit me, so I packed my things and left immediately. I did not know where I was going. I only knew I would not let him ruin that memory. He had already taken a lot from me, and I refused to let him take that too. Story 89. I don't understand why he killed himself. It's just because of a girl. I have it harder in life and I didn't do it. With what I went through, I'm still standing. Why not him? I got immediately disgusted and reminded him that suicide is not a competition. We broke up the next day. Story 90. My ex-partner and I got into a really stupid fight because I used a friend's vape pen. I only took a few hits to get a small high and relax. She scratched herself hard, sent me a photo and texted, "This is what you made me do to myself." Leaving that relationship felt like a prison sentence being lifted. Story 91. Offered money to a panhandler and then tossed it on the ground. Story 92. On my birthday, his feet hurt, so I ran to get him a taxi. I did not know if he saw me, so I called his name a couple of times. He got in and told me he expected me to apologize for being annoying. I refused. He yelled at me and called me a bitch among other insults. I spent my whole birthday crying and feeling miserable while he bullied me into apologizing. It was not the only thing, but it was the moment I lost all respect for him. Story 93. I asked him why he wanted to get married at this point in his life. He said he was not particularly interested in marriage but felt he should because all of his family members have children and he wants children, so he might as well get married to avoid polygamy. A few hours later, he revealed he already has a child who was born last month. Story 94. Eugenics is a great concept, and the Holocaust wasn't that bad. I am Jewish. Story 95. Back when she was in middle school, an ex-girlfriend was invited to the birthday party of a not very popular girl in her class. She went and they all had a good time. A week later, one of the popular kids had her birthday. The birthday girl's wealthy parents rented her a limo. They drove the limo past the unpopular girl's house and yelled mean things out of the windows. I said, "God, children can be such assholes. Now that you are a college student, you must wish you could go back and change that." She said, "Nope, I don't have a problem with it." I remember thinking, I must be misunderstanding something. I discovered that she had a streak of taking joy in being cruel to others. Story 96. I had started dating this guy, and whenever he slept over he would shower in the morning. The weird thing was he always had some body odor even though he showered every day. I finally brought it up in a non-judgmental way, and he told me he did not actually use soap or even scrub. He literally just rinsed off. I was grossed out and told him he needed to use actual soap. He laughed and said he was probably right and that once he had found mold growing between his toes. That was over 15 years ago, and it freaked me out so much that to this day I scrub extra hard between each toe when I shower. Story 97. Honestly, laugh if you want. She didn't put the shopping cart back. I was seeing signs that she might not be the person I thought she was, but that was my last straw. Story 98. One guy I dated in college told me he was so angry at his roommate, who had let him live there for free and had done something mildly annoying, that he put Febreze in the roommate's pet turtle's food for weeks to kill it. When I asked, "You killed your roommate's pet?" he said, "No, the thing wouldn't die." Story 99. This man's mother was German, and he would say, "My mother threw bombs for Hitler." She did not. She was a small child during the war. He said it with such pride. It was really strange. He would also say, "I am half Hitler, half Mussolini," because his father was from Italy. Then he would talk about his father fighting for the United States in World War II and how he was a hero. He was seriously confused and just an idiot. Story 100. I found out the woman I had been dating for a few months was a convicted pedophile. I left that situation immediately. Story 101. You cannot rape your girlfriend or wife. It does not count if you are in a relationship. Story 102. Her manipulation of almost everyone in her life for her own gain disgusted me after a while. Story 103. At 21, he told me that before I started talking to him, he had been trying to get with and pressuring a 16-year-old high school sophomore because of her physical attractiveness. I immediately broke it off. My dad is a private investigator. He reported the man, who was arrested and released 3.5 months ago. He had served 2 years in prison, was released early for good behavior, and is on parole for the next 5.5 months. I do not tolerate that. From what I know, the girl is doing much better now. She got in a lot of trouble with her parents, and being questioned by detectives scared her straight. Story 104. After a year of living together, he told me he had a 9-year-old daughter whom he had lost custody of. He was legally allowed to see her only in a supervised contact center, and I worked out from gaps in his story that this was due to his abusive behavior. However, he had stopped seeing her when she was 5 because she did not seem to like him. He decided this was caused by her guardians telling her he was bad, rather than by anything he had done. This was despite the fact that he had also admitted he hated and resented her at times. Story 105. We were semi-successful playing blackjack at a casino. He said, "Don't tell his child's mother about this. She will want child support." Story 106. He confessed that he did not attend my grandfather's funeral because he wanted to play in an online video game tournament with his friends. Story 107. He told me he watches pornography involving school-age girls. He is a teacher. That is disturbing. Story 108. He started ranting about how easily women could get any man they wanted and how men like him had to fight to get a date. We are 50, and this was my first date in a year. It was not that easy. He was controlling from the start and tried to buy my affection, offering to buy me a new car on the 3rd date. He was so unpleasant that I walked away. I did not want his car or his vacations. Story 109. Disgusting is a strong word, but I met a man on a dating app who was 30 minutes late to our first date. He said he had called his mother beforehand to discuss me. Discuss what? We had never met. Story 110. If you do not get an abortion, then we will never work out. Some background. We were in our mid-20s and about to be married when we found out we were pregnant. We both wanted children, and I had made it very clear 2 years before we ever had sex that I personally could not bring myself to have an abortion. If I became pregnant, I would see the pregnancy through. I had dealt with many mental health issues when I was younger and knew an abortion would destroy me emotionally because family and friends who had once showed me that side. I have always been pro-choice. When we discovered the pregnancy, he had me talk with each of our pro-choice friends to try to get me to abort. Fast forward to now. I have an amazing 8-year-old son, am divorced from his father, and remarried with 2 other little ones. I never once second-guessed my choice. Story 111. My ex-boyfriend told me he once gave his brother a hand job. I couldn't get past that and broke it off a few days later. Story 112. Living in London, my ex was racist. He said things like brown people, and I am South Asian, deserve to be stereotyped as terrorists for the safety of the population. His mother said that if the British massacred any groups of people, such as in the Bengal famine, the Tasmanians, or the Mau Mau concentration camps, then they must have deserved it. They were Jewish, and it goes without saying that the Holocaust was an atrocity, but I was surprised at the lack of empathy for other groups of people in that family. He was also a misogynist. He tried to dictate what I could wear. I started covering up in front of him because he made me feel uncomfortable, almost like a creepy family member. But he knew I did not otherwise, which angered him. He also said that when he sees a girl in a shirt, a skirt, or anything revealing, he has an intense reaction. His whole body tenses and his hands become fists. He had a sheltered upbringing, and I think it affected him in some ways. Story 113. We ran into a friend at a park. He was overweight and said he was exercising there to lose weight. I admire people in that situation who are taking steps. I understand it can be a real challenge, even though it is relatively easy for me. After we passed him, instead of saying something supportive as I had intended, my then significant other, who was slender and fit, laughed and said he sure needed to. This, along with rude treatment of restaurant servers despite occasional kindness, irreparably changed my image of them. Story 114. He made jokes about incest. I told him they were not funny and asked him to stop. For more times, in separate conversations, he brought it up as a joke. I told him each time that I did not like it. The final time I said, "Oh great. More incest jokes that nobody thinks are funny," and I stopped responding. A few weeks later, he messaged asking if he had done something wrong after I had not replied to any of his hey messages. I replied yes. He asked what he had done, and I reminded him about the jokes I had already told him I disliked. He acted bewildered and said he could not remember joking about it after the first time. I pointed out the exact conversations, his comment, and my responses. He said, "I know it's no excuse, but it's been a really hard year for me," or something similar. I never replied again. Story 115. He told me that he had quit work because, even though he sent a document directly to the opposing plaintiff rather than the plaintiff's counsel, it was his boss's responsibility to ensure he did his job correctly. I realized then that he couldn't take responsibility for himself. And it was over. Story 116. She said she had options. At 11:45 p.m. on New Year's Eve, we were together alone during lockdown. That led to the worst year of my life with her. I was a fucking idiot to have stayed. Story 117. My ex had one towel and no toilet paper in his bathroom. When I asked where it was, he said, "Toilet paper is expensive and washing things is cheap." I don't know how I had missed how gross his house was before this, but it was like a light switch flipped and I suddenly saw it. His main pair of shoes were women's Uggs he found in a McDonald's lost and found, and he had moldy dishes we threw away rather than wash. He had enough money, he was just gross. Story 118. She would always try to convince me that people were being racist toward me and my family when they were not. I am black. She is white. Story 119. I was on a date with someone who casually said he believed minors could consent to sexual activities with adults. That is one of the worst things I have ever heard on a date. Story 120. Fiancé had a spare room full of Doctor Who books and memorabilia. We had been talking about having children, and I said that kids being kids, one might get into that room and damage something. Without hesitation, he replied that he would beat them. I told him that if that ever happened and he touched my children, I would rip his face off. Those words and the look on his face sickened me. We broke up shortly after. Story 121. My long-term girlfriend asked me, "If we broke up, how long would you wait before sleeping with anyone else?" I responded, "Probably a few months or longer, depending on my headspace and healing time." She replied unprompted, "Oh no, I would sleep with the whole town the next day." It felt manipulative and gave me a strong feeling of disgust. Story 122. This was a long time ago, but he told me he thought Sonia Sotomayor was too ugly to be a Supreme Court justice. Story 123. She told me she went to her professor's place and slept in the same bed next to him but insisted they did not have sex. I broke up with her on the spot, laughing my ass off. Story 124. He became annoyed that Star Wars had a female lead, a black supporting character, and other actors who were not white. Story 125. My ex told me he thought the Native Americans got what they deserved because imperialism is basically survival of the fittest. I dumped him for that. Story 126. He signed away his parental rights and never saw two children from different mothers. He was completely absent from their lives. No child support, no visitation rights, nothing. To them, he was just a stranger. The worst part is that the second time he did it, his daughter was 7. A judge will only grant a termination of parental rights, and thereby relieve a parent of responsibility to pay child support and similar obligations if it benefits the child. He must have been severely at fault for that to happen not once, but twice. I broke up with him the next day. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.